Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and we have a really interesting program today. Many people are concerned about the future of democracy, and my guest today is David Baumwoll, who wrote a book, Ruthie for the People. And maybe we could start by you telling us a little bit about yourself. I had you on my radio program when WVOX was around.
That's right.
And I was really impressed because you were selected as one of the future leaders in the country.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today, and thank you for having me back. We got a chance to speak after I was selected as a Presidential Leadership Scholar. And that was a program run by the Presidential Centers of Bill Clinton, George H.W. Bush, Lyndon Johnson, and George W. Bush. And so during that program, it was very much about figuring out how to really maximize your impact on the world and figuring out what it is that you want to do. So in many ways, this book stemmed from that experience. But just a little bit about me, I began my career actually as an elementary school teacher in Newark, New Jersey through Teach for America. So I taught language arts literacy and knew a ton about the books that we had our students read. I know firsthand that there was quite a gap when it came to teaching about democracy and civics. But after teaching, I went back to school and went into policy work for a little while. I then became a prosecutor in the Bronx, where I prosecuted human trafficking crimes, gun trafficking crimes, and then did some criminal justice reform work. And now I'm in private practice at the law firm of Porter, Thomas, Grable, and Baumwoll, where we do all sorts of litigation. But the most important part of my life right now is that I'm a dad to two kids, 6 and 3, and they really inspired this book. And it was really just from their questions. My older daughter had a lot of questions about democracy around elections, and I did a terrible job of answering her. Everything I said needed another explanation. I fumbled through it. And I realized that for kids, so much of what they learn and how they make sense of the world are the stories they read and see. And when I was looking for stories that kids could relate to, that shows democracy in action, there just weren't many.
I always get sworn into office before like kindergartners and second graders, and the way I highlight what democracy is about is I ask them if the town should get rid of all the playgrounds. And then they all, I say, we're going to have a vote. And they all start yelling and screaming. And I say, okay, you win. Then I say, how about, do you think we need to close down the pool in the summer? And then they all start yelling and screaming. And I say, this is what democracy is all about, is you get to participate. As an elected official, I have to make choices based on the budgets. If I tell your parents, oh, you know what, we could save a couple of dollars by having no more playgrounds, do you think they should say, save money, no playgrounds, and they all want the playgrounds? And that's sort of the way I introduce kids to democracy.
I love that. You should have co-authored this with me, because one of the things that's a challenge in terms of teaching democracy to kids is not just the concepts, but making it relevant to things that they see every day. And so picking the topic was a challenge also, because it has to be important enough that you can imagine kids being moved to action in some way, but at the same time that it's not such a big problem that it would be beyond the scope, or that it would be almost a distraction for the main point of the book, which is really the process of democracy.
And that's really, it's important to make it relevant, because kids don't understand, like if you say, what do you think about Ukraine, or what do you think about, Venezuela, they're not going to understand it. But if I say, the Greenburgh Nature Center has animals, should we allow pets at the Nature Center?
Right.
That's something that they could understand. Now, your book, it says save friendship trees, protect the environment, kids' voices count. What grades do you think this book is a good book for kids to start reading?
Absolutely. So I think this book is well suited for kids in 2nd grade through 5th grade. And the hope is actually to offer this to teachers as well as a tool for them to teach their students. Because I think we often teach democracy to kids in a way that's it can be dry and it can feel disconnected. And I think they need to be able to relate to this, to the experience that someone's having in order to care about the system to make change.
When I interviewed you on my radio program years ago, nobody thought democracy was at risk.
Right.
Now we wonder if we're going to have a democracy. And I'm wondering if that was a motivation for your book.
Absolutely. I think this book felt far more urgent because at home and abroad, democracy is being tested. And I think, I'm a millennial. I grew up in the late 80s and 90s, and nobody really seemed to doubt it. Nobody really seemed to doubt that democracy was always going to be there. But I am reminded of Benjamin Franklin's quote after the Constitutional Convention. Everyone comes out, they wrote the Constitution, and they said, what kind of government do we have? And he said, a republic if we can keep it. And if we can keep it stays in my mind because it's not a guarantee. And we have to make the case for democracy to every generation. They need to see why it matters for them. They have to see why it matters for the country. And they have to see that it's something worth fighting for.
In terms of some of the chapters in your book, could you discuss some of the lessons that you're trying to teach?
Absolutely. So one of the key lessons actually I wanted to teach in this is that when it comes to democracy, a lot of these decisions are complicated. They are not always a clear right versus wrong. It's a give and take. And so in this book, there is a move to knock down a huge portion of the town's woods, including the beloved friendship tree, in order to build a factory for the town. And so one of the key tensions in the book is about the town's need for additional jobs and environmental concerns. And the main character, Ruthie, sort of struggles with this because she sees now that it's not always that straightforward. And so she had to do her own sort of reflection as to what mattered there. So the fact that...
How did she come out at the end? I'm curious.
Yes, well, I mean, spoiler alert. So she actually inspires her mother to run for mayor. And so a big part of it is her campaign. And one of the campaign planks is that they were going to use a pre-existing space to bring in the same company without knocking down the woods. So that there was it might have been slightly smaller, but it was sort of a middle ground. And so she was very inspired by the idea of coming up with a compromise.
That's
like
great.
This. And so that was one of the lessons. The other lesson is making sure that people know, that kids know, that you can, to paraphrase Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you can disagree without being disagreeable. We can disagree without being enemies, right? I think too often right now we get into these camps and see the other side as an enemy when they just disagree. And I think it's so important to have conversation, to understand why it is that someone feels a certain way about a particular policy issue. But I think particularly now, as people get entrenched into their positions, we need to start the younger generation with the knowledge that we can disagree on things. And not only is that okay, it's actually a very American thing to do, to be able to disagree without being enemies. So that was another really key point that I wanted to emphasize.
Or when people are running for office, even against individuals, you could still be friends, or you could basically say thank you for participating in our democracy
Right.
and giving people a choice. Because when you're in office, you don't want to have contested elections, but that's bad for democracy.
Right.
Democracy is important. It's important for voters to have the chance to express themselves, and it gives elected officials momentum once they win.
Absolutely right. And because I think at the end of the day, democracy in its best form is a battle of ideas, not a battle of people, right? And so you have the people who are advocating for a particular side, but it's about their ideas. And once that is done, we still need to be able to see each other as people, like you're saying. And actually, to reference Ruth Bader Ginsburg again, I'm reminded of her relationship with Justice Antonin Scalia, right? Who they could not have been further apart ideologically, but they were incredibly close friends. I mean, the two of them were sort of the voices for the conservative versus liberal side, and yet they would go to the opera together afterwards because they respected each other as people. And I think that's the kind of example that we need to instill in the next generation, because it's so easy to shout at people and not hear them.
I note that you keep mentioning Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes.
And my first campaign manager, Phil Weiser, clerked for Justice Ginsburg on the Supreme Court.
Wow.
And now he's the Attorney General of Colorado, and he's running for governor of Colorado. And I think I looked at the Denver Post, and they said that he's clearing out the Democratic field, so he'll probably be governor. And he was my campaign manager.
That's amazing.
So,
Keep an eye out for him.
Yeah. So, in terms of any other lessons in your book that?
Yeah, so one of the lessons is also that problems or events that come up really wake us up to why democracy matters. And here, this was about Friendship Tree being destroyed, and that woke up the younger generation and inspired their parents to take action. But one of the things that has been very interesting in terms of people's reaction to the book is not just the kids' reaction, but that parents and adults have been really thinking about the kinds of events that made them care about democracy. And if you go by generation, I mean, there are certain sort of watershed moments that woke up different generations. I mean, you had during the Vietnam era, you had young people getting drafted, right? They had to pay attention quite a bit to what was going on in the democracy. You had the civil rights movement. You had, I mean, for my generation, I think 9/11, war. There were all of these. There were all these events that made people pay attention. They might have disagreed as to what to do about it, but it's been fascinating to hear from so many people about the things that mattered to them, the things that made them look around and say, I need to understand the system so that I can have an opinion, so that I can be involved, so that I can raise my voice if and when I get the chance.
And one of the things that I want to do is spend some time trying to motivate people in their 20s and 30s and 40s to get involved, because a lot of the people who are currently involved in government, everybody's in their 60s or 70s, and it's probably all an outgrowth of the Vietnam War.
Right.
And
right.
And it would be nice. You don't have as many people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s really involved, and I sort of feel that's something that I'd like to work on in the next couple of years, is mentoring younger people and having a whole group of young people who will get involved, be active in civic groups, and then eventually run for office.
I love that.
Which I think is real. I think that could be one of the most important initiatives, because then you're preparing the town for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Absolutely.
Is there any other things that could be done that could motivate younger people to get involved. And this book is really good because it could really make an impression on, on a second or third grader. You never know what's going to connect with them.
Right.
In fact, I had a situation a couple of weeks ago. Somebody emailed me. I had recognized her when she was in second grade. And I invited her to speak at the town board meeting because she and her grandmother wrote me a note saying they wanted, I think, Jackson Avenue repaved, like a traffic safety improvement. So I invited her. I invited her on my cable TV program, and also at a town board meeting. And now she's applying for college, and
Wow.
and she asked for a copy of the video.
Oh, that's amazing.
And she remembered being on TV, and is using the video for her college application.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think it's also a great example of the fact that when people feel as though they have agency in our system, that they have the power to be involved, to be a participant, I think that makes all the difference in the world, right? I think too often people feel as though the system is something far in the distance, that other people are making decisions for me. What does my voice really mean? And I think any opportunity to say, not only does your voice matter, but we need it. We need your voice because this is about, the society, the rules we want for ourselves, and we get to choose that. And so I think in terms of what you were saying about getting people involved, any opportunity, I think, to give people a microphone, and that doesn't necessarily mean at like a town hall, but to get their feedback, to see that their feedback makes a difference in some way, I think it empowers people to feel like they matter in this system. And I also think local government in particular, you can see the tangible changes of your voice, right? It's one thing to work on a campaign for the U.S. Senate, right? That's wonderful, and it's very important. But you often will have to wait a long time to see anything that are the fruits of what you did. When it's local, you can see it when you drive to work, when you drop your kids off at school. Your work and your advocacy is where you live, and I think that's a key to bringing people into discussions about democracy, and is really key to inspiring them to be leaders.
Yeah, and I had a other situation where a number of years ago, there was a sixth grader. She reached out to me saying, I want sidewalks. I invited her to a town board meeting. She was interviewed on like some of the network TVs when she was in sixth grade. We are building more sidewalks. I've stayed in touch with her, and this summer she told me she was applying to be a page in the Congress.
Awesome.
And sometimes when an elected official treats a student who's not eligible to vote with respect, and they make them feel that their voice actually does count, that could really have an impact on their whole life. And that's what I really feel is important. So your book really, people will think about it, and you never know how you could, somebody who reads this book could eventually be president of the United States. You never know.
That's the
and
hope.
It could be reading this book, and then they say, gosh, I'm going to go get involved. Before I forget, how do people get the book?
So this is available on Amazon. So it's Ruthie for the People, Saving Friendship Tree. So it's available for order on Amazon, and it'll come right to your doorstep in like 2 days.
Great, unless Amazon goes on strike.
That's true. That's true. But it should be convenient, and I'm hoping to get it into as many hands as possible. Just because I think some of the conversations I've had with parents whose kids have read it, they say they're asking me questions now about the different things going on in our democracy, whether we're talking about the federal level or why is this part of my town closed down for to rebuild something, or what happened here that like that feels unfair. All of these thoughts and conversations are really the motivation for this book. I want kids to start thinking critically about what's around them, to get in the habit of raising their voice and really sharing it with, if it's a parent to start, then maybe it's a teacher, then maybe it's their peers, and then maybe it's their community. And so I hope that this book is a spark for the kids who read it to want to be more involved and to believe that their voice matters in the discussion.
How long did it take you to write the book?
Yeah, so probably around 2.5 years. As I mentioned before, I have 2 young kids, so it was sort of when I could steal away time, when people fell asleep, and when I myself could actually stay awake to do it. So about 2 years, 2.5, and was editing for a little while, but the process was very cathartic. Also during a time where there are so many questions about our democracy and the strength of it. And so this felt like a really great outlet for me, who is someone who is concerned about the direction that we're going in. And I think it was, the time was something that it just made a very big impact on me personally, to be able to provide a little glimmer of light in what I hope is the right direction.
How did you figure out like the chapters? How, I'm curious. What steps you took in terms of coming up with a book.
So so as I mentioned, I'm an attorney, and one of the things if we're going to write a legal brief to the court, a lot of times people will start just with the table of contents to get a sense of what are you arguing, what is this about, and so I wanted the chapters and I wanted the title to be something that if a kid or a teacher were to just scan down the titles of the different chapters, they would have a sense of where the book is going, and to put it in language that is accessible to kids. And I think too many times adults, when they describe democracy, will use terms that kids don't understand. There is a presumed sort of baseline of knowledge, and I wanted to start from the ground. This is our system. This is what we call this. This is what a government is. This is what democracy is. This is what it means to be a representative. But weave it in a way that wasn't just like a lesson on a blackboard, right? That it's part of the story organically, so that kids want to learn about it and understand why they need to know it.
That's really, really great. Have you been in touch with any of the local schools?
Starting to. So this came out about a month ago. So I'm in the process of contacting some of the local school districts, and I did have the pleasure of reading this. The first reading I did was to my daughter's first grade class, and we had a mock election, like you were saying when you speak to kindergartners. It was between 2 stuffed animals. It was a heated race between whether all lunch was going to be mac and cheese or hamburgers, and it was won by 1 vote. Mac and cheese won out by 1 vote. So,
oh wow,
it was heated.
And were people calling hamburgers bad names?
Luckily, it all stayed above board. Right? No, it didn't evolve into anything crazy. But we also were using it to show some people just like it one way, other people like it another way. They're still your friends in class. You can disagree on it without being enemies. And so I think that landed, and I was able to do that. That was the first reading. It was the day before Election Day, so that if their parents went out to vote the next day, they would say, "Oh, I voted yesterday in the election of mac and cheese versus hamburgers."
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it was a way to make it personal and fun for them.
And is that what you would recommend teachers do? Is make it very for first, second, third graders? Make something relevant to their lives.
Yes, and I think I've seen so many. I've seen teachers have amazing lesson plans in this regard. So I wouldn't presume to tell a teacher how to do their job, because they certainly know. But what I have found in my experience is the more relevant, the more it's a story they can relate to rather than just facts to memorize, the more it's going to stick with them. And they're going to be able to connect it to their life in a way that it otherwise would just be another lesson. And so I think a lived experience, thinking about another kid caring about democracy, is a really helpful way to help it stick with kids. And I think one of the pieces of feedback from a young reader I got was that they were imagining the kind of things that they would want to fight for. That they said there's a park down the road that if they tore that down, I would be devastated. I would have to be like Ruthie, get my friends together and have a protest and do all of the things that are required to move the ball down the field. So just that idea of, if this were me, not only what kinds of things would I care about, but what could I do about it? And that's why I wanted this to be in a story form.
That is great. We're running out of time. Is there anything else that you want to mention? And again, this book, Ruthie for the People, Saving Friendship Tree, is on Amazon.
It is.
And my guest is David Baumwoll, and he was selected, just a handful of people around the country, as part of a presidential leadership program. Did you get to meet any presidents?
I did. I got to meet President Clinton and President George W. Bush, and just hearing sort of their insights on leadership, and it was sort of bipartisan in nature, right? The idea that there were disagreements on policy, but you can still be friends. You can still figure out a common ground.
Did they speak to your group at the same time or at different days? Different
centers. And the group that we had there was also ideologically diverse, right? And so it was, to a certain degree, you didn't know what anyone's political affiliation was.
Do they still do that?
They do. Every year there's a new cohort.
And are some of the alumni, because this was a few years ago, has any of the people in your group run for office?
Yes, a number have been appointed to. Someone from my class just appointed to the Secretary of Health and Human Services for Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia, and so there are a lot of people who come from the program and are in a real position to make an impact.
Would you ever want to run for office?
We'll see. Maybe someday.
That's the best answer for democracy, is saying we'll see, because right. Then nobody knows what you're going to. Well, that's a great answer. But I think we're really lucky to have you in the community.
Oh, thank you.
You live in Tarrytown.
I do. Yes.
And good luck. And I really appreciate this. And I'll recommend this book to friends and constituents. And I have a 2.5-year-old niece, and when I see her, I'll tell her in a couple years she has to read this book.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thank you.
Paul.
Great.